long before that tragic debate performance. And so it was with a great deal of nerves that I started writing this week, and then everything went to hell last night. And I thought, how do I deal with all of this? And the answer was, as best I can. So, aging, older and wiser, perhaps. Advancing age brings on many things. Changes to our bodies, changes to our minds, changes to our priorities. The last 2 weeks have been filled with a lot of talk on news programs about how age affects a person's capacity to be a national leader. 2 weeks ago, millions of people watched a debate in which two old men took to the stage and exhibited behavior that caused concern in many directions. One spoke disproven lies without correction and made accusations of malfeasance, while the other one seemed like he had recently wandered away from the campus of a memory care facility. Since then, newspapers and movie stars and politicians of his own party have called on the sitting president to remove himself from the presidential race and let someone younger run in his place. The New York Times famously called for him to step down, bringing a chorus of voices to wail that the editorial board had not seen fit to tell the other guy to drop out because he's a cheater and a fraud and a convicted felon and all that other stuff. Eventually, the Times did print words to that general effect, but still, it was the first one that made all the noise. Now, our world is filled with examples of people working, excelling, and thriving long into their senior years. Sir Ian McKellen is 85, still active in theater. Sir Patrick Stewart is 84, and they often work together. Jane Fonda is 86 and still politically active. Dick Van Dyke is 98 and speaks and acts like a man in his 50s. Now, the West, particularly the United States, seems less equipped somehow to deal with our universal mortality than people in other cultures. In many Eastern countries, for example, and even some parts of Western culture, longevity is seen as a privilege, an honor, an accomplishment, and a thing that brings with it respect, wisdom, and status. The U.S. is a younger nation than many of those others and has in its DNA an affinity for youth. I would also argue that that affinity is rooted in the capitalist focus on productivity, in the ability to make things that are of value to others. What is valued in this nation is not necessarily the wisdom of elders, but the newest, bright, shiny bit of tech that will feed us an endless stream of dopamine, kitten videos, or add to the largest numbers in our bank account. Now, when you stop adding to your bank account, our culture often views you as no longer adding to the broader society. And thinking in simplistic binary terms, if you are not adding, then you are subtracting, and therefore no longer a thing to be valued, but an expense to be managed, minimized, or even dismissed. Our culture focuses so singly on human productivity that one of the questions we ask when first meeting someone is, what do you do for work? As we age, we retire from our professional pursuits, which leaves us with feelings of disconnection and isolation, like we are unmoored from something very secure and large. Our work pays the bills, but it also provides us with social interaction and stimulation and connection and a sense of purpose. When we retire from the workforce, we lose a large part of how we identify ourselves. I am a teacher. I am a farmer. I am an engineer. I am a cook. I am a nurse. I am a what? We can describe ourselves without first identifying our own place in the capitalist economy, can we? I am a parent. I am not a parent. That is a fairly common identity, though, one accessible to most people here. Now, how those words feel change as the children grow. I am a parent of an infant means something very different from I am a parent of a teenager, or I am a parent of a molecular scientist. Those are very different ways to be a parent, from what I understand. As we age, we must adjust how we relate to the world in which we live. This is true at any age. Toddlers adjust to learn new skills and self-propulsion. Older children learn to navigate the structures of school and social interaction. Older kids still learn new ways to study and learn, then learn independence, and then learn to form their own communities of peers. Along each step of the way, we adjust to the reality in front of us. With good luck and good health, we can enjoy a stimulating and rewarding professional career for as many as 4 or 5 or even 6 decades. So when it comes time to leave that alone and retire, we have to figure out again who we are and why we are here. What is our role now that we are not directly engaged in the economy in the same way? Or for parents, what does it mean to be a parent when the child moves out? There are countless articles, some scholarly, many not, addressing our relationship to aging. Some focus on how to avoid aging, supporting a gazillion-dollar industry of wrinkle creams and hair restorative products. Others list myriad changes that lie ahead and how to cope with or avoid those things. One fear named most often by people asked about aging is the fear of loneliness, of disconnection. In a society where many in our social circle are in our work setting, retiring from work removes us from a large part of our social community. We can become isolated and alone without a clear sense of purpose. Heart disease and cancer hold steady, as they have for decades, at the top 2 causes of death among seniors. What we don't talk about is how much depression affects aging and death, particularly for men as they age. Suicide rates for men over 65 is greater than rates for women of the same age by factors of 6 to nearly 16 times as people age. To be clear, we're using reasonable numbers. For every 100,000 men between the ages of 65 to 74, 26 will die by suicide in a year, while in a group of 100,000 women of the same age, an average of 5.5 will die by suicide. As the ages increase, the rates of suicide among men increases while the rate of suicide for women decreases. In a group of 100,000 men aged 85 or older, the number that will die by suicide in a given year is 55.7, up from the 26 at 65. For women 85 or older, that number is 3.5. Loneliness is a real factor in these statistics. Loneliness and the ability to cope with it. In a broad, sweeping generalization here, I understand that, women in the U.S. are socialized to rely on others, to form groups of connection for mutual emotional and social support. Women are encouraged to have deep emotional connections with other women. Men generally are not taught how to care for one another in the same deep emotional way. Men are taught to rely on women for that sort of emotional labor. And when they are widowed, when they have no skills at managing their own feelings, nor do they have another system to support them in their grief and loneliness, they suffer. And yes, these are broad, sweeping declarations, but I have like 15, 20 minutes to make a point, so just work with me. Those statistics are grim and a bit off the topic of the moment, but they are real and they need to be named. If you are feeling isolated and alone and not sure what to do about that, reach out. Reach out to me or to another church member, to a local senior services agency. You are not alone in this world. What you are feeling is real and serious, and you are not a bother or a burden if you ask for help. Now, back to the age and wisdom thing. Does our alive time make us wiser as it makes us older? Does it make us sages like the Dalai Lama who turned 89 last week? Do we accumulate wisdom with each gray hair or wrinkle? Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are both 80 years old and still active as who saw that? Jack LaLanne dropped dead, not these two. Right, okay, for those who are younger, Jack LaLanne was a fitness guru in the 70s and 80s, dropped out of a heart attack. Boom. But they're chemically preserved, I'm sure. But Dame Judi Dench is 89 years old and sharp as hell. But I heard an interesting thing in an interview. She no longer takes acting roles. She no longer acts in movies or films because she is quite blind and cannot read the scripts anymore. But she does appear on television programs and makes public appearances, and she can quote Shakespeare in a voice and tone that would make anyone fall silent in awe. Is she too old to be competent? Hell no. On the other hand, Dame Judi Dench, 89. On the other hand, Rudy Giuliani just turned 80. And he seems incompetent in just about every regard. He's lost his grip on reality. He has become a caricature of the crazy old man who shouts angrily at the world. Convinced that every conspiracy theory contains deep and abiding truth. He's had his law license revoked and is facing court penalties for his behavior that has caused great harm to others. His friend and former client, maybe, who never paid him, the former occupant of the White House, has exhibited clear signs of cognitive decline. He was recently recorded raving about being, I think, in an electric boat that was battery operated, that was sinking in shark-infested waters, and being faced with the choice of being electrocuted in the boat or jumping in with a shark or something. Anyway, dude is clearly not connected to reality. But nobody talks about cognitive decline with him, right? President Joe Biden, on the other hand, is clearly tired. He's 81, and there is no doubt that his brain is stuffed full of information and wisdom accrued over the years. He's slower than he was as a younger man, and his memory lapses and name-switching gaffes are legend. But is he too old to be an effective president? I don't know. The man we watched stumble through the debate a couple weeks ago looked really ragged. He wandered a bit in television interviews as well. But then he held a press conference after the NATO summit and answered questions about foreign policy for the better part of an hour, showing us that he did, in fact, still have most of his marbles left. And then Friday night, he spoke at a rally in Detroit and tore the house down. So he uses a teleprompter, and that helps him a lot. It keeps him on track and reminds him of the points he needs to hit as he speaks. It even holds his best jokes so he doesn't forget them. I use a script on Sundays. If I did not, please believe me here, I would wander about verbally and say disconnected, weird, possibly inaccurate things until somebody in the back flags me down and tells me to shut up. I am not going to give that man a hard time for using a teleprompter. Older, wiser, those two guys are 3 years apart in age. It's not like one of them's a chicken. Life offers us a variety of things. The menu changes as we age. The food sometimes has to be less spicy. Sometimes we need to remove salt from our diets. Maybe we choose things that are easier to chew than we would have ordered in our youth. But are we incompetent to do things? And what kinds of things? Drive to the grocery store? Teach a class? Lead a nation? Have access to the nuclear codes? All of that is as individual as we are. I should not have the nuclear codes. Not because of my age or my politics, although some might argue that, but because that is not my area of expertise. I do not have the qualifications for that job. Can I drive to the supermarket? Sure thing. Can I build things? Not as easily as I once did, but sure. Can I work on high ladders and roofs? Nope, not anymore. I worked in construction on the Casco Bay Bridge, which is one of the tallest, longest drawbridges in North America. And I clung to the outside of a pier with nothing to hold on to but my hammer and a wrench as we took the staging down. Now I can't go higher than a 6-foot stepladder. Things get oozy. Aging well requires a certain degree of humility and vulnerability. Aging means we must rely on others, sometimes strangers like medical care providers, to help us meet our basic needs. Being able to maintain one's dignity through this transition is a challenge. Some of us are taught young that needing help is a sign of weakness and of personal failure. Those are the ones who have the most difficulty with aging. I cannot say how aging will affect each of us. Some will fight it, some will embrace it, some will begrudgingly endure it. This week I am approaching the last birthday that starts with a 5. And I am having some feelings about that. I'm still not ready to have birthdays that begin with 5. But my body and my knees and my arthritis says otherwise. However each of you experiences aging, I ask that you keep in mind that longevity is a privilege denied to many. I'm glad that you're alive. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad to meet you wherever you are on the journey of life, should you want to chat about that. In closing, I want to offer a poem. It's a beautiful poem by Liesl Müller, and it's a story of the Impressionist painter Claude Monet and his aging eyes. And it's called Monet Refuses the Operation. Doctor, you say there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and what I see is an aberration caused by old age and affliction. I tell you, it has taken all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges you regret I don't see, to learn that the line I called the horizon does not exist, and sky and water so long apart are the same state of being. 54 years before, I could see Rouen Cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun, and now you want to restore my youthful errors, fixed notions of top and bottom, the illusion of three-dimensional space, wisteria separate from the bridge it covers. How can I say to convince you the House of Parliament dissolves night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames? I will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches, becomes water, lilies on the water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white, cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take a long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it, to paint the speed of light. Our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and change our bones, skin, clothes to gases. Doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world, blue vapor without end. May we all continue to embrace life today and always. Amen.